My mom said my girlfriend was just venting to her boss. At the hospital waiting room, a toast died, and a black card holder made the Coworker story. Rot just as my job reference started shaking. The black card holder showed up before I had even finished lying to myself that the morning was under control. We were in the oncology family lounge, one of those half-soft hospital waiting areas with bad coffee, dim lamps, and chairs arranged to encourage quiet panic. My mother had insisted on bringing a thermos and paper cups like we were going on a road trip instead of waiting to hear whether her scans had shifted anything we could not shift back. Lena, my girlfriend, sat beside me with her hand on my knee in that careful public way that was supposed to read as support. My mother liked her best in rooms like that. Calm, helpful, competent. The kind of woman who knew where the extra chargers were and how to speak to nurses without sounding frightened. My mother had just said, "She's only been venting to her boss. That's all. Work pressure makes people strange." When one of the volunteers came by with the pile of things people had left on the side counter during intake, phone charger, scarf, water bottle, and a slim black card holder. "Whose is this?" the volunteer asked. Lena's hand came off my knee too fast. I turned before she could. The card holder had a little gold mark in one corner and a pressure crease across the flap. I knew it immediately because I had seen my manager carry one like it during off-site lunches. Same brand, same worn fold, same ridiculous taste for expensive small leather goods. The volunteer handed it toward our row, and before Lena could say anything, my mother actually smiled and said, "Probably hers. She's had a long week." The volunteer passed it over. Lena took it, but not like someone taking back her own wallet. More like someone intercepting an object before it could be opened. That was the first bad turn. The second was smaller, and maybe if I had not already been raw and sleep-deprived, I would have missed it. When Lena closed her hand around the card holder, a cream business card slid half out from the top sleeve. My boss's name was on it. Marcus Bell, Senior Director. His direct number under the logo. And tucked behind it, visible only because the card had shifted, was the edge of a folded receipt with a little handwritten note on the back in blue ink. "L, you know where to find me." Nobody in the lounge said anything for a second. My mother's face changed first, but only a little. Not shock. More like she realized her harmless explanation had developed teeth. Lena pushed the card back in. "It's nothing." That word landed wrong in a hospital room. I heard a plastic spoon drop into a paper cup 2 rows over. Somewhere behind us, the television mounted in the corner kept running a muted daytime show with captions no one was reading. Soft shift. Normal hospital sounds continuing while every cell in my body narrowed down to one small black object in Lena's hand, and the fact that my mother had defended her a second too early. I said, "Why do you have Marcus's card holder?" "It's not his card holder. His card is inside it." It got mixed in. My mother said too quickly, "People swap things at work all the time." I looked at her. She lifted her chin, the way she does when she knows she has entered a room morally before everyone else and expects to be obeyed for it. "I'm saying don't jump." Lena stared at the floor for half a second, then back at me. "I wasn't hiding it." That was an odd sentence. Not I borrowed it, not it's mine, not he handed it to me by mistake. Just, I wasn't hiding it, which is the kind of defense people reach for when the object already says more than they wanted it to. I held my voice level because once I lose my tone in public, people stop hearing content and start hearing performance. "Then explain it." Lena rubbed the edge of the card holder with her thumb. "Marcus gave it to me after a rough meeting because my tote was split and stuff kept falling out." My mother nodded as if she had solved it. "There." I didn't even look at her. "And the note?" Lena's mouth tightened. "It's old." The volunteer, realizing she had delivered something radioactive, drifted back toward the desk without another word. Around us, the waiting room did that quiet, awful thing public places do when people want to seem respectful and become more attentive instead. I said, "Old from when?" "It doesn't matter. That's not a date." My mother leaned toward me. "Clara, that tone, the one she uses when she thinks I am about to embarrass both of us instead of protect myself. I knew it from church, from school meetings, from the year I was 19 and refused to let my uncle rewrite a story about money he borrowed and never paid back. She doesn't care about truth first. She cares about sequence, about whether truth arrives at a socially survivable hour. I said, "You just told me she was venting to her boss." "She has been. That card holder does not look like venting." Lena inhaled sharply. "What exactly does it look like?" "A private thing." "It is not." "Then why are you gripping it like that?" That got her. She loosened her hand a fraction too late, which only made the crease across the leather more visible. Used, familiar, not something borrowed once at a copier. And maybe I was already making it bigger than it was. Maybe the hospital and my mother's scans and the lack of sleep had me hearing intimacy in every bad object. I can admit that. I was not neutral that morning. Marcus had been a sore point for weeks, not because I had proof of anything, because Lena's language around him had shifted from annoying to careful, and careful is often where betrayal starts long before anyone admits it exists. My mother looked between us and said, "She said it was from work. Let her speak." Lena gave me the kind of look that asks for privacy without earning it. "Marcus gave it to me after my bag ripped. I forgot to return it." "That explains the leather," I said. "Not the note." She was quiet. The silence was worse than the note. Notes can be reframed. Silence just sits there and makes its own case. I said, "Lena." She finally answered, low enough that my mother had to lean in to catch it. "It was after drinks with the team. He was making sure I got home." There it was. Still not enough to call an affair. More than enough to rot the harmless boss story my mother had offered on instinct. My mother said, "That still isn't what you're making it." I turned to her then, because suddenly she felt more dangerous than Lena. Not because she had the card holder, because she had chosen her side before she knew the object. Because once my mother stakes herself to a version, she defends the version harder than the person. If Lena stayed salvageable, then my mother had not defended the wrong woman in the wrong room at the wrong time. I said, "You don't even know what I'm making it." My mother's jaw tightened. "I know enough to hear stress, and not romance." Lena closed her eyes for a moment. Tiny, controlled. "Can we not do this here?" That, more than anything, made me think the note meant exactly what my stomach said it meant. Not a full affair, maybe. Not something clean enough for strangers to agree on. But an emotional lane. A private loyalty. The kind of soft betrayal people always try to relabel as support until someone else's mother watches it happen in an oncology lounge. I held out my hand. "Give it to me." Lena did not move. The TV in the corner kept flickering silent captions over somebody's smile. A nurse opened the far door and called another family name. My mother set her cup down very carefully and said, "Clara, be smart." That would have helped if Lena had handed me the card holder right then. Instead, she said, "No." She said it quietly, which somehow made it worse. Not loud enough to cause a scene. Not sharp enough for anyone outside our row to call security in their head. Just a low, controlled no. Like refusing me was the reasonable option, and the only unstable thing in the oncology lounge was my reaction to it. I kept my hand out anyway. Lena. My mother got there before she did. "Give her a minute." That was when I turned fully toward her. There are moments when you realize the most dangerous person in the room is not the one who hurt you first. It is the one already trying to contain how you're allowed to respond. Lena had the card holder. My mother had the authority. Medical setting, family setting, moral setting. She had already started laying down the terms. Don't jump, be smart, let her speak. All language designed to make my restraint the main standard and Lena's secrecy the secondary issue. I said, "Why are you running interference?" "I am not. You are literally doing it." My mother sat straighter in the awful vinyl chair and gave me that look she saves for moments when she thinks I am about to become the story. "Because we are in a hospital," Lena finally spoke. She's right. That hurt more than I wanted it to. Not because it was a cruel sentence, because it was aligned. Two women looking at me like tone was the emergency, and the object in Lena's hand was merely unfortunate. That is how private loyalty fractures happen in public. Not with grand declarations, but with one person subtly choosing where to stand when you need the truth more than composure. I lowered my hand, not because I was done, but because reaching again would have made me look like exactly what both of them seemed ready to call me if I pushed 1 inch harder. I have learned that lesson in too many rooms. Once you look physical, once you look loud, once you look like the person who cannot regulate, everything before that gets washed out by your own reaction. So I asked instead, "What drinks?" Lena looked relieved I had moved back into language. "A team thing." "What team thing?" It was after quarter close. My mother nodded like that settled it. I looked at her. Please stop nodding at half answers. That actually stung her. Good. Maybe petty, but good. Lena rubbed the card holder seam again. Marcus stayed after because I was upset. About work. Yes. And the note. It was because I left early. You left early from drinks. Yes. After he made sure you got home. Yes. The shape of it got worse with every clipped answer. Not because any one line was conclusive, but because together they sounded like a private orbit that had been built, one soft excuse at a time. Boss, drinks, upset, got home. You know where to find me. If someone wanted to tell me I was hearing romance because I was primed to hear romance, they would not be entirely wrong. But if someone wanted to say those details sound intimate in exactly the wrong way, they would not be wrong either. My mother said, "She just answered you." I almost laughed. "No," I said. She arranged nouns next to each other. Lena's face went flat. "What do you want me to say?" "The part where this became personal enough for your boss to put notes in your things. It didn't become what you think." That line again. Not a denial, just an objection to my framing. The waiting room air felt too dry. The coffee smell coming off the side cart made me nauseous. 2 chairs over, an older man was pretending to read a folded sports section while listening to every syllable. A volunteer rolled a supply cart past the doorway. Soft shift. The hospital kept performing routine while my relationship was getting quietly renamed in front of my mother. I said, "Was this before or after you told me Marcus was only useful because he knew how to keep you calm in meetings?" Lena blinked. That was a remembered line, and she knew it. 3 weeks earlier, after I had asked why she was answering Marcus's messages at 11 p.m., she had told me he was good in crisis and the only one who doesn't make me feel stupid when I spiral at work. I had let that go because workplaces do create odd dependencies, and because I did not want to be the girlfriend who hears emotional significance and translates it immediately into cheating. But there is a point where emotional significance becomes the whole problem. My mother looked between us. "When did you say that?" Lena said. "It wasn't like that." I ignored her and answered my mother. 3 weeks ago, my mother's expression changed then. Not all the way. Just enough to show she had lost the first version she'd committed to. She had been defending venting. Boss pressure. Rough week. But boss pressure with notes and after drinks handoffs and late night calming had a different smell to it, and she could smell it now. That should have made me feel less alone. It didn't, because now the room had 2 new humiliations in it. One, that my mother had started on Lena's side and was being forced to inch backward in public. 2, that my boss's name was sitting inside this thing, not just my girlfriend's boss. Mine too, in a practical sense. Marcus had told me twice he'd be happy to speak for me when I applied for the program coordinator post next quarter. Not a promise, not a favor exactly, but enough of a professional foothold that I had spent the last month trying not to offend him while also trying not to hate how often he entered our apartment through Lena's mouth. I said, "Why is his card in there?" Lena answered too fast. "Because it slipped in." "From where?" "His desk." "How?" She looked at me like the question itself was unfair. "Because he gave it to me when my bag tore." "That's not how cards slip," my mother said softly. "Clara." There was something almost pleading in it this time, which irritated me more than her earlier control. Pleading means she had begun to understand the shape of the thing but still wanted me to respond inside rules that would leave her dignity intact, too. My mother hates nothing more than being publicly wrong in a room where sympathy is a finite resource. I asked Lena, "Did you ever tell me he gave you something personal to carry?" "It wasn't personal. It had a note. It was practical." "You know where to find me is not practical." That landed in a way nothing else had yet. The exact words, said out loud, forced all three of us to hear how soft they were. Not flirtation in the cartoon sense. Worse. Familiar. Available. The language of a person who expects emotional access without needing formal arrangements. Lena looked exhausted suddenly. You are hearing it in the worst possible voice. I'm hearing it in the only voice available because it's written down. My mother reached for my sleeve then. Light touch, a warning more than comfort. Whatever this is, you need to remember where you are. I pulled my arm back. Not hard. Enough. She froze. Lena did too. I hated that they both looked at me the same way for half a second after that, like I had become the instability they were already bracing for. It made me furious because I knew how it looked. Daughter in an oncology lounge. Girlfriend cornered. Mother trying to keep order. If I pushed too far, I would lose the room morally even if I was right. That is the trap of these situations. The more humiliating the clue, the more politely you have to carry it, or everyone starts grading you instead of the betrayal. So I made the first real choice of the day. I stood up, not to leave, just to change the angle of the conversation and get out of the row where my mother could touch my sleeve like I was a child in church. Lena looked up at me. What are you doing? Giving us one chance to stop talking around it. My mother said, sit down. No. The older man with the newspaper finally looked openly now. A nurse at the far desk glanced over and then away. Soft shift again. Same oncology lounge, new geometry. Me standing, them seated. The black card holder still in Lena's hand like the center of a problem she wanted, reduced back to office stress. I asked one more question, and the reason I asked it was because I already knew the answer mattered more than any note. Did Marcus know we were fighting about him? Lena's face changed. Not much. Enough. She did not answer right away. And that was the answer I felt first, not the content. The pause. If she had said no immediately, maybe I would have hated how quick it sounded. Maybe I would have thought she was rehearsed, but at least the shape would have been clean. Instead, Lena looked at the black card holder in her lap, then at me, then somewhere just past my shoulder like she was trying to find a version of the truth that did not detonate in an oncology lounge. My mother said, Clara, don't do this. I laughed once under my breath. Amazing. I ask one real question and suddenly I'm the one doing something. Lena finally said, he knew we had tension. That was another one of those adult sentences people use when they want to sound honest without surrendering the core of what you actually asked. Tension, I repeated. She nodded once. About work, about boundaries, about how much he was around. So yes, it's more complicated than yes. My mother stood up then, which changed the room in a way I hated immediately. Seated, she could still pretend to be an anxious patient holding a family together. Standing, she became something else entirely. A witness with rank. Somebody who might decide what version of this counted as responsible behavior before I even finished hearing it. Enough, she said. Both of you. No one moved. That always surprises me about people like my mother. They think the right tone still works, long after the facts have slipped past it. I looked at Lena. Did you tell him I was asking questions? Lena's jaw tightened. I told him things felt tense at home. What things? That you didn't like how often I talked about work. Which is not what I asked. She looked tired. Not fake tired. Real, stripped, hospital fluorescent tired. And because it was real, it complicated everything. The worst betrayals are the ones that still leave room for your sympathy to make you feel stupid. I told him you were uncomfortable, she said. There it was. I felt something drop in my chest. Not because it proved a physical affair. It didn't. But because it meant Marcus was no longer just a boss, Lena vented to. He had been let inside our private problems. He knew enough to leave a note like that and assume it would land softly, maybe even helpfully. He knew there was strain between us, and still felt close enough to place himself as a point of access. Private loyalty fracture. That was what it felt like in plain terms. Not body betrayal. Alignment betrayal. My mother spoke before I could. Why would you tell him that? Lena looked at her, and for the first time that morning there was something harder than guilt in her face. Irritation, maybe, or exhaustion at being cornered by two women who wanted different versions of clarity from her. Because he asked if I was okay, she said. That is not an answer, I said. It is. No, it's the beginning of one. She stood up too. Now all three of us were standing in a waiting room full of sick families pretending not to hear a relationship come apart in low voices. The TV kept flashing silent captions. A volunteer restocked cups near the coffee machine without once looking over. Soft shift. Same room, different pressure. No longer row-seated damage control. Now it was an accidental triangle with too many witnesses and nowhere to put your hands. Lena kept the card holder at her side. That bothered me more than it should have. Or maybe exactly as much as it should have. She still was not putting it down, not offering it over, not breaking the object's hold on the conversation. She was literally holding the clue while asking me to hear her generously. I said, "Did you tell him we fought about him specifically?" Lena swallowed, not in that wording. Again. Partial honesty. The kind that rots trust faster than outright lying because it makes every sentence technically survivable while leaving the emotional meaning intact. My mother folded her arms. You realize how this sounds? That should have helped me. It didn't. It only made me angrier because now she was migrating, in public, away from the position she had defended 30 seconds after the card holder appeared. She was not protecting me. She was protecting herself from being on the wrong side of the room too long. Lena heard it too. Oh, now it sounds bad? My mother lifted her chin. I said from the start that work pressure makes people strange. That is not what you said. It is close enough. I almost smiled at that. My mother lives on close enough whenever precision starts costing her dignity. I stepped in before they could turn it into a side argument that let Lena disappear into the crossfire. What did Marcus know? Lena looked at me with a kind of contained frustration that made me wonder, for one ugly second, whether she felt more misunderstood than guilty. That is one of the doubts people would fight over later if they heard the story. Was I cornering a woman who had leaned too hard on a boss during a bad season? Or was I finally seeing the shape of something she had been hoping to keep morally blurry until it passed? He knew we were struggling, she said. With what? With me being overwhelmed. With you resenting how much I was working. With me not wanting to come home every night and do another post-mortem on Marcus. The sentence hit harder than I expected because buried inside the defensiveness was a sliver of truth I recognized. I had been doing that. Every time his name came up, I had stored it. Replayed it, waited for the next mention. Not because I was paranoid for fun, because Lena's tone had changed around him and I could feel it before I could define it. But yes, once I felt it, I did start collecting. That is part of my pattern. She knew it. My mother knew it. Marcus, apparently, knew it too. I said, so he knew enough to know I was the obstacle. Lena's eyes widened a fraction. That is not what I said. You told him I didn't like him. I told him home felt tense. You're still not answering the actual shape. My mother said sharply, Clara, lower your voice. I was not shouting. That annoyed me all over again. It is incredible how often women are told to lower something that is already lower than the room deserves. Lena looked down at the card holder, then back up. He knew you felt threatened by him. There it was. My boss knew my girlfriend thought I felt threatened by him. Not just work tension, not generic stress, not she's overwhelmed, personal triangulation with job consequences attached. Because Marcus was not merely her boss. He was also the man I had been hoping would speak well of me when the coordinator opening posted. He had my resume. He had looked me dead in the eye last month and said, when you're ready, I'm happy to put in a word. Now I was standing in an oncology lounge, realizing that same man had probably heard some softened private version of me from the woman I shared a bed with. My mother saw the shift in my face and said, what? I almost didn't answer her. Then I did, because if the room was already dirty, she could stand in it too. He's my reference for the coordinator post. Her expression changed completely then. Not softer, sharper. Career sharpened her faster than romance ever could. That was another thing about my mother. Heartbreak was regrettable, but reputation was an emergency. Lena said, I wasn't trying to affect that. Did you tell him I was difficult? No. Did you tell him I was suspicious? No. Did you tell him I was threatened? She paused again. Not long. Long enough. That I felt watched by you, she said carefully, and that it made work harder sometimes. I just stared at her, because that was almost worse than calling me suspicious. Watched sounds unstable in office language. Harder sounds unprofessional. She had not merely shared emotional tension, she had translated our private strain into a version my boss could fit inside management. My mother said, very quietly now, "Lena." The whole lounge felt thinner. A nurse opened the far door and called another patient name. Someone near the TV began to cry softly into a tissue. Life and illness and paperwork kept moving all around us, while I stood there learning that the woman who kept telling me Marcus was only a source of support had also made me legible to him in exactly the way that could rot both love and excesses, work at once. I held my voice flat, because if I let it crack now, both of them would hear emotion before content. So he didn't just know we were tense, I said. He knew enough to write you notes and enough to think I was the kind of person who made your job harder. Lena opened her mouth. My mother got there first. And the worst part was, by then I already knew whichever side she chose next would matter almost as much as Lena's answer. My mother said, "You should have never told him that." That was the first time all morning she stopped trying to soften it. Lena flinched, and I would have felt bad for her if I had not been too busy noticing what my mother had just done. She had crossed the room, not toward me, exactly, toward the version of events she could still live with. 30 minutes earlier, she had been defending Lena on instinct because the idea of my girlfriend merely venting to her boss fit inside her preferred worldview. Hard-working woman, stressful season, don't embarrass yourself with jealousy in public. But now the boss knew enough about me to affect my professional life, and that made it real in a language my mother respected. I said, "So now it matters." She turned to me. "It mattered before." "No, before it was me overreacting in a hospital. Because we are in a hospital. And now," she didn't answer. That silence told me everything. Now it was a practical problem, a credibility problem, not just relationship pain. The second Marcus moved from Lena's emotional orbit into my job future. My mother's whole posture shifted from social containment to damage assessment. Lena looked at both of us like she suddenly understood she had lost the easiest version of the room. "I didn't know he would ever say anything to you professionally." "That's not the point," I said. "It is part of the point." "No. The point is you let him into our private life far enough that he could." She opened her mouth again, then stopped. That hesitation mattered. Not because it proved she had done something physical with him. It didn't. But because it showed she knew exactly where the line was, and that she had at least come close enough to feel its edge. The lounge doors opened, and a transport aide wheeled an older patient past with two relatives trailing behind. Soft shift, hospital motion, squeaky wheels, the little burst of corridor air that smelled like sanitizer and cafeteria coffee. Everyone near our row looked somewhere else too deliberately. The room had fully accepted that something personal was happening and was now trying to be decent about overhearing it. I asked, "Did Marcus ever know you and I fought about him by name?" Lena said, "Not like that." I laughed once. "You keep saying that like it helps. It matters how people say things. Then say it cleanly." She looked exhausted. "I told him you were asking why I answered him so late. There it was. Not everything. Enough. And he wrote that note after that? It wasn't because of that. Then when?" She looked at the card holder in her hand, then at my mother, then back at me. Again, that triangle. Again, the private thing trying to survive under public lighting. "It was after I left the team drinks," she said. "I was upset. You already said that." "I know. So say the part you're avoiding." Her jaw tightened. He could tell I didn't want to go home upset. The sentence hit harder than any flirtation would have. Not because it was explicit, because it was domestic, because the person she chose to read her that closely, or allowed to read her that closely, was not me. It was Marcus, my boss, her boss. The man whose business card was tucked inside a leather holder with a note that sounded like access. My mother said quietly, "That is a bad sentence, Lena." Lena looked at her, and for the first time all day there was a little anger there. "I know how it sounds." "No, I said. You know how it is. She turned back to me. You don't get to decide that from one note and one rough night. That was fair enough to sting, because she was right in one narrow way. I did not have a body, a confession, a hotel receipt, a chain of texts. I had a card holder, a note, a relationship that had shifted around Marcus, and a set of admissions that all pointed in the same direction without fully closing the circle. If someone later told me I had converted emotional sloppiness into certainty because the setting made it unbearable to sit in ambiguity, I would have to admit there was truth in that, I said. Then give me a version that doesn't require me to be stupid. Lena swallowed. Marcus became the person at work I could breathe around. My mother closed her eyes briefly. There it was again. Not a fair language, not sex language, not anything a sane adult could take to court. Worse in some ways. More survivable to deny. More humiliating to live beside. A private loyalty fracture. The idea that the space in Lena that should have still bent toward me first had been quietly rerouted through someone who knew how to calm her, answer late, write little notes, and carry enough personal access to leave his card inside her things. I said, "Did you want him?" She stared at me. That was one of those moments that would split people instantly. Some would say the question was unfair in a hospital waiting room, with my mother's scans still hanging over the day and my tone already too sharp. Others would say it was the only honest question left after all the careful half-language. Both would be right. Lena answered slowly. Not in the way you mean. I nearly smiled from sheer disbelief. That is a terrible answer. It's the honest one. Then I hate your honesty. My mother stepped between us then. Not physically dramatic, just one pace forward, enough to interrupt the line of sight. That should have felt protective. It didn't. It felt managerial. She was deciding the room had reached its safe quota of truth and that further damage needed to be redirected. That's enough for now, she said. No, I said. Yes. I looked at her. You do not get to clock this out because it finally sounds ugly to you too. Her face hardened. I get to say we are not turning an oncology lounge into a trial. And Lena got to turn my boss into a private confidant. The words landed too loud even though I had not raised my voice much. A woman near the coffee cart looked over, then away. My mother's tone changed then. Colder. You need to think about what matters most in this room. There it was. Not support. Leverage. She was no longer trying to defend Lena. She was trying to discipline me through context. Sick mother, hospital, public space, family dignity. The message underneath was simple. Whatever Lena did, my response could still make me the less forgivable one if I mismanaged the setting. That is how parents become more dangerous than partners. Not by hurting you first, but by deciding the terms of acceptable pain. I said, "What matters most to you right now, me or this not looking messy?" Her eyes flashed. Do not do that. That's not an answer. She folded her arms. If you blow up in here, nobody is going to remember nuance. They are going to remember you. Lena said my name softly. And I hated that too. Hated how both of them were suddenly aligned again around my reaction instead of the thing that caused it. The axis had shifted. From betrayal to containment. From what Lena handed Marcus to how well I could swallow it in a room full of strangers. I made the second real choice of the day then. I sat back down, not because my mother won, because I understood the trap. If I kept pushing upright, in public, with hospital staff and frightened families all around us, I would hand both of them exactly what they needed. A new topic, Clara's behavior, Clara's tone, Clara making a medical waiting room about herself. No, I wasn't giving them that. But sitting did not mean surrender. I looked at Lena, then at the card holder still in her hand, then at my mother. And I asked the question neither of them wanted because it tied love, work, and betrayal together, too cleanly to redirect. Did Marcus write that note before or after he agreed to be my reference? That question changed all three of our faces at once. Mine because I heard how naked it sounded the second it left my mouth. Not jealous in the abstract anymore, not even only about Lena. It tied the whole thing to work, to credibility, to the exact practical future I had been trying to build while pretending Marcus's name in our apartment was just annoying and not dangerous. Lena because she knew the timeline mattered. My mother because she finally understood why I had gone from hurt to furious without ever really raising my voice. For a second, nobody answered. The oncology lounge hummed around us in the worst possible normalcy. The television in the corner rolled a smiling dentist through a captioned commercial. Someone tore open a packet of crackers behind me. The doors to the infusion corridor sighed open and closed. Life kept refusing to pause for the private moment that had already wrecked mine. I said it again, before or after. Lena lowered herself back into her chair slowly, like sitting might buy her a few extra seconds. It didn't. She still had the card holder in her hand, and I noticed she had finally stopped stroking the seam. Just holding it now. Gripping it, after, she said. My mother let out a breath that almost sounded like a curse, which from her was basically the same thing. That one word explained too much too fast. Marcus had agreed to be my reference, after he already had this private, emotionally charged lane with Lena. After the note, after the drinks, after knowing I was apparently harder to be around or watching or whatever softened version Lena had used. The professional offer I had been treating like something earned suddenly looked contaminated by information I never consented to share. I asked, did he offer because he knew me through you, or because he knew enough about me to feel sorry for me? Lena looked up sharply. No, too fast, but different from the other too fast answers. This one sounded offended, which only complicated things again. Know what? He didn't pity you. How would you know? Because that's not how he is. That sentence made me laugh once, and I hated the sound of it because it came out smaller and meaner than I intended. You defend him really naturally. She flinched. Good. Maybe unfair, but good. My mother said, Lena, answer the question directly. There. Another shift. She had stopped managing me and started pressuring Lena. That should have felt validating. It didn't. It felt late. It felt like she had finally changed sides only once the damage became legible in a language she respected. Career, reference, reputation. If Marcus had stayed just an emotional issue, I wasn't sure she ever would have moved. Lena looked between us. He offered because he'd seen your work, and because he knew what, exactly, about me. She pressed her lips together. That things were tense at home. My mother said flatly, you should never have done that. Lena looked tired enough to fold. I know. No, I said. You know it sounds bad. That is not the same thing. Her eyes snapped back to mine. What do you want from me? The truth. I'm giving you what happened. No, you're giving me portions. That was the problem with every answer she'd given me all day. None of them were obviously false. They were just narrowed, trimmed, sanded down into survivable pieces. Team drinks. Rough meeting, got home safe, tense at home. He let me breathe. All of it may be true. None of it enough. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and kept my voice low. Did Marcus know I was applying for the coordinator opening before he offered to reference me? Lena stared at me for a second and then said, carefully, yes. How? Another pause. I mentioned it. Of course she had. The humiliation of that landed in a different place. Not romantic humiliation this time. Professional. The slow, sick feeling that two people had been discussing your next move while also carrying private emotional current between them, and you had been walking into meetings with one of them acting grateful. My mother sat down too, and the fact that she was seated again somehow made her more dangerous, not less. She had become focused now, less worried about the room, more worried about consequences. Family chooses sides before facts are settled. That was exactly what this was turning into, and my mother was choosing the side she could justify to herself, which was not the same as choosing me. You told your boss, she said to Lena, that her home life was tense, that she was uncomfortable with him, and that she wanted that position. Lena said, I didn't put it like that. No, I said, you just arranged nouns next to each other again. She looked at me with a flash of anger. You are acting like I handed him your diary. You handed him enough. If I had wanted to hurt you, I could have. That went so still after she said it that for a second I thought even the TV had gone silent. She heard it too. because her face changed immediately. That is not what I meant, but it was already in the room. Not a threat, not exactly. More like an accidental revelation of scale. She knew things that could affect me. She had chosen what to share and what not to share. She had controlled the shape of me in someone else's head. That was the part I couldn't get past. Not whether she had physically cheated. Not even whether Marcus wanted her. That she had moved private information across the line and then expected me to live inside the edited version. My mother's voice dropped. That was a bad sentence. Lena shut her eyes for a second. I know. I almost said everyone knows a lot all of a sudden. I didn't. The lounge was already too full of lines that sounded clean only after they had done the damage. A nurse passed through the far doorway with a clipboard, glanced toward us, then kept moving. Soft shift again. Public space, private implosion. The hospital held its routine like nothing human inside it could ever be unusual. I said, "Did Marcus ever say my name outside work?" Lena opened her eyes. Yes, there it was. How? He asked if things were calmer. My stomach dropped in a way it hadn't yet. Not because of the content, but because of the familiarity in the phrasing. Calmer. The language of follow-up. The language of someone who had previous context and expected new reports. And what did you say? Lena looked down at the card holder. That depended on the week. That was probably the moment the argument stopped being debatable inside me, not because it proved a physical affair. It still didn't, but because it proved recurring intimacy of a kind I would never have consented to if it had been described honestly. Marcus wasn't just a boss she vented to. He was an alternate emotional checkpoint for the state of our relationship. He had access to weather updates on us. My mother must have seen something settle in my face, because her tone changed again. Less sharp, almost careful. Clara. I looked at her. We need to get through today first. There it was. The new version of her side. Not Lena is innocent. Not you're overreacting. Just postpone the damage in the name of the larger crisis. Mother in oncology. Daughter be reasonable. Girlfriend secondary for now. Family chooses sides before facts are settled, and she had chosen delay over me. I said, no. You need to get through today first. Her expression hardened. Do not be cruel. I'm not being cruel. I'm being accurate. Lena whispered my name. I didn't turn, because suddenly I could see the whole shape too clearly. Lena had hurt me. Marcus had crossed into my life in ways no boss should, but my mother was the one preparing the room I would be expected to live in afterward. The room where my response became the problem, and everyone agreed to revisit the betrayal only when it was socially tidy. That made her more dangerous in the moment than Lena was. I stood again. This time, neither of them told me to sit. I said, I'm going outside for 5 minutes. My mother said, Clara, if you walk out right now. I looked at her, and she stopped. Not because I frightened her, because she finally understood I was no longer asking for permission from either of them. Then I looked at Lena and said the thing I had been trying not to say in a waiting room full of strangers. You made my boss emotionally closer to my life than I agreed to. She looked like I had slapped her. Maybe because it was the first sentence all day that named the actual betrayal without needing anything more from the card holder. And maybe because she knew I was right enough that defending herself would only make the next answer worse. She did not follow me when I stepped out of the oncology lounge. That mattered. Not because I wanted a dramatic chase into the hallway. I didn't. But because if Lena had stood up right then, if she had chosen me over the room and the card holder and my mother's stare and whatever version of dignity still remained, I would have felt it. Instead, when the automatic doors hissed shut behind me, I was alone in the corridor with a row of beige chairs, a vending machine humming at the far end, and my reflection cut into strips by the glass panels beside the nurse's station. I leaned against the wall and tried to breathe like a normal person. Hospital air always makes me feel 12 years old. Too clean, too dry, full of messages that begin with attention and end with uncertainty. I could still see into the lounge through the narrow window in the door. My mother was sitting again. Lena was standing now, saying something low and urgent, the black card holder still in her hand. Even through glass, I could tell my mother wasn't comforting her. She was assessing. The difference is small from a distance. Huge, up close. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Not a call, a text. Everything okay? I stared at it long enough for the screen to dim. That might have been the most clarifying moment of the whole day. Not because the text proved an affair. It didn't. A boss could text that. A mentor could text that. A person who already knew too much and had been given too much access could definitely text that, which was exactly the problem. He knew enough to check in on me in the middle of a hospital morning. He knew there had been strain at home. He knew, somehow, enough to feel entitled to the temperature of the day. I did not answer. The lounge door opened behind me. Not Lena, my mother. She stepped out with that careful, measured posture she uses when she wants to sound reasonable and end up in charge. The hallway lights made her look paler than she had inside, which almost threw me back into daughter mode for a second. Sick mother. Bad timing. Don't make this harder. That reflex is old in me. She knows it. She has leaned on it before without always meaning to. Your phone went off, she said. I heard it. Was it him? I looked at her. You're asking a lot of very precise questions for someone who wanted me to stop making things messy. Her mouth tightened. I wanted you not to implode in a waiting room. No, you wanted this delayed until it felt manageable to you. That is not fair. It's exactly fair. She crossed her arms, then uncrossed them immediately, as if she caught herself becoming too much like herself. I am trying to get through a medical day without watching my daughter set fire to her own life in public. There it was again, my reaction as the flame. Not the hidden loyalty shift, not the note, not the fact that my boss knew enough about my relationship to text me in a hospital corridor. My reaction, I said, you still talk like I'm the dangerous part. My mother looked back through the window into the lounge, then at me again. Today? Yes, that should have made me angry. Instead, it made me cold, because it was honest. Cruel, maybe. Self-serving, definitely. But honest. She had chosen the side of sequence over the side of injury. My mother would always rather treat a betrayal as something to be scheduled than a fire to be named. She thinks that is wisdom. Sometimes it is just cowardice, dressed in better shoes. I held up my phone and turned the screen toward her. Marcus. Everything okay? She read it. Her face didn't collapse or widen. It just narrowed. That was her real version of shock. When did he send that? Just now. She looked back through the window again. Did Lena text him? I don't know. That was one of the doubts I knew would never leave this cleanly. Maybe Marcus had texted because Lena told him we were at the hospital and he was checking in about her. Maybe because he knew enough about us to sense what was happening from silence alone. Maybe because he and Lena had an ordinary work bond that now looked poisoned through the card holder. But ordinary work bonds do not usually send little handwritten notes and ask if things are calmer. My mother said, "Do not answer him." I almost laughed. Interesting, I said. Now you don't want me to engage. She ignored that. If this gets to your department in the wrong shape, you lose more than the relationship. There it was. Again, not Clara. Are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Not I misread her. Career first. Optics first. Containment first. That was the side she had chosen, and at least now she was choosing it openly. I know, I said. She lowered her voice. Then stop trying to make this about moral clarity. It's practical now. That sentence probably would have kept me tethered to her a year ago. Maybe 6 months ago. Not then. Not with Marcus's text glowing on my screen like proof that what Lena had built was not just emotional sloppiness. It had become a channel. A live one. I said, it was practical the second she made him part of us. My mother did not answer. Which meant she knew I was right and still wanted me to behave as though being right were less important than being orderly. The lounge door opened again. Lena stepped out this time. She looked wrecked, but still controlled, which was somehow more infuriating than if she had fallen apart. People like Lena can carry themselves through disasters in a way that makes everyone else feel unreasonable for reacting at full size. She saw my mother beside me, saw the phone in my hand, and understood the update before either of us said it. Did he text you? She asked. My mother answered before I could. Yes. Lena shut her eyes for a second. That doesn't mean anything. No, I said. It means exactly enough. She looked at me. I didn't ask him to. Maybe true. I believed she believed it. That was the problem all day. Too many things were plausible and still unforgivable. Did you tell him we were here? I asked. Yes. My mother made a sharp sound. Why? Because I was worried about your scans and I had to move a meeting and he asked why. That was workable. Ordinary even. Except nothing about the morning felt ordinary anymore, and Marcus was no longer entitled to any of our context in my mind. And you also told him what? I asked. That we were tense, that I was difficult, that I made home feel watched, that I'm applying for the coordinator post. What else did he get? Lena's eyes flashed then, the first real anger of the day. You are making me sound malicious. No, I'm making you sound intimate in the wrong direction. That landed. I could see it. My mother said, both of you stop. Neither of us did. Lena stepped closer but kept space between us, which I noticed. She had the instinct not to touch me now. Good. Smart. Too late. I leaned on the wrong person, she said. That is true. I let work bleed into us and us bleed into work, and I told myself it was temporary and manageable because I did not want to admit how far it had gone. There it was. Maybe the cleanest sentence she had given me all day. Not an affair confession, not innocent either. My mother looked between us, then away. That, more than anything, told me her side had moved. Not all the way toward me, but away from Lena's harmless boss cover. Quiet reversal. That was the only way to describe it. No apology, no dramatic declaration. Just a subtle withdrawal of protection because the facts had become too expensive to keep defending. I asked Lena, did you want him to replace me? She stared at me, and the sadness in her face then felt so real I almost hated myself for asking. Almost, no, she said. I wanted him to replace pressure. That's not the same. It is if I'm the pressure. You weren't always. That answer would stay with me longer than the note, not because it was cruel, because it was probably true. Maybe that was the final ugliness of it. Emotional betrayal does not need a hotel room or a kiss to rot a life. Sometimes it only needs one person deciding another feels safer than home, then passing around pieces of the home life until the outside person has earned a say in the atmosphere. By then, the line is already crossed, even if nobody wants to name it. My mother spoke again, but softer now. Clara, whatever happens next, do not answer Marcus today. I looked at her. It was not support, still management. But it was the first management choice all day that was fully on my side. Fine, I said. Lena's face changed at that. She knew what it meant. Not that I had chosen my mother. That I had stopped choosing her version of delay. I unlocked my phone, opened the message thread, and blocked Marcus right there in the corridor. Lena inhaled sharply. Clara, don't. I looked up. That's the only clean thing in this entire mess. Maybe it was rash. Maybe a future version of me would regret doing it before I had the coordinator posting settled, before I knew whether he had actually been a threat professionally or only emotionally. But I needed one boundary in a day built out of leaked ones. My mother saw the block screen and said nothing. That was how I knew she agreed. Lena said, quieter now. You're going to make work harder. I almost smiled. You should have thought of that before he became part of my relationship. No one had an answer to that. A nurse stepped into the corridor and called my mother's name. The room shifted again, back toward medicine, toward the original reason we were there, which somehow made the personal damage feel even meaner. We had come in scared about her body and walked out with something else failing too. My mother straightened automatically, smoothing her sleeve like she could still put order over all of it. She looked at me first, then Lena. Family choosing sides before facts were settled. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't need to. Come with me, she said to me. Not to us. To me. Lena heard it. So did I. I don't know whether that counted as comfort or simply the final redistribution of loyalties. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But it was clear. I nodded once. Lena stood in the corridor holding the black card holder at her side, no longer protected by my mother's first instinct, no longer able to call Marcus harmless, and no longer able to pretend the real injury was only my tone. I followed my mother through the doorway without touching Lena on the way past. That was the reversal. Quiet, ugly, incomplete. No confession everyone would agree on. No neat breakup speech. No heroic certainty. Just my mother stepping away from the version she had defended. My boss cut out of my phone. My job reference hanging in the air like a cracked tile. And my relationship no longer intact in the shape it had been that morning. Sometimes betrayal does not arrive by proving everything. Sometimes it arrives by proving enough that the people who wanted you calm stop asking for calm.